Imagine this for a moment. You're 54 years old, living in Canada, and feeling on top of the world. You're training for a half marathon, your health is solid, and life feels good. Then one day, you stumble across someone online who convinces you that you've got a hidden allergy. They tell you the only way to fix it is through their special diet program. Sounds harmless enough, right? But what happened next nearly destroyed her kidneys, and it shocked everyone. This case was so puzzling it had an entire team of doctors scrambling for answers, and it was later published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Why? Because it drives home one powerful truth: the wrong diet can have devastating consequences. Our patient, we'll call her JS, went from training for a half marathon to needing a wheelchair. She came terrifyingly close to dialysis, all because of one dietary mistake. A mistake that many people might be making right now without realizing it. JS endured countless tests, endless stress, and near despair before a stroke of luck led her doctors to ask the right question. One simple blood test finally revealed the cause. But let's rewind a bit. JS was a 54-year-old woman who arrived at the hospital with one alarming complaint: she couldn't walk. On top of that, she was exhausted and her heart rate was 103 beats per minute. Not dangerously high, but high enough to notice. She brushed it off, thinking it was just anxiety from being in the hospital. And this reveals something about her: she avoided doctors at all costs. It took a lot of pressure from her family to even get her to seek help. By the time she did, her condition had spiraled so far that it was obvious something was very, very wrong. So here's the big question: could the doctors figure out what was wrong with JS before it was too late? Let's look at the clues together. When she was examined, her legs were swollen, with a rash spreading across them. Her calves were so tender that even the slightest touch caused unbearable pain far worse than the swelling seemed to explain. That was the first hint that something deeper was going on. But here's the thing: at that moment, the doctors weren't thinking diet. Nobody would. Instead, their top priority was to rule out a blood clot. And for good reason. A clot that goes untreated can break loose, travel to the lungs, and be deadly. In medicine, missing a clot when the signs are there is considered a never event. That means it's a mistake so serious, so preventable, it should never happen. So naturally, that's where the doctors started. The first test they ordered was an X-ray, just to make sure nothing was wrong with her bones. Was it a fracture? A fast-moving infection? Maybe even a tumor pressing on her muscles? But no, none of those showed up. Next, they moved to an MRI. Fortunately, it was done without contrast dye, which spared her kidneys, but again, all they saw was edema fluid collecting in her legs. Now, if you're like me, you might already be thinking, wait a minute, fluid in the legs? That often points back to the kidneys. Swelling is one of those sneaky signs of kidney problems that can easily fly under the radar. But at this stage, her doctors weren't thinking about her kidneys at all. No, their minds were on something else entirely: cancer. Which is why the next step was a CT scan of her chest, abdomen, and pelvis, searching for any sign of a hidden tumor. Now, let's pause for a moment and talk about CT scans with contrast and why they can be so dangerous. These scans are incredibly useful because they give doctors a sharper, clearer picture of what's happening inside the body. In JS's case, her doctors were using them to look for cancer. But here's the problem: when contrast dye is involved, the stakes are very high for anyone with chronic kidney disease. That dye can be toxic to the kidneys, and in some cases, it only takes one scan to cause permanent damage. There are stories of patients with stage 3 kidney disease who ended up in stage 5 dialysis territory after just one contrast scan. Imagine that. You go in hoping for answers, and instead, you walk out with your kidneys pushed from manageable to catastrophic. This complication even has a name: contrast-induced acute kidney injury. Now, in JS's case, her kidneys weren't the issue when she first arrived. Her creatinine was just slightly elevated, not alarming enough to set off any alarms. But the truth is, the body can only handle so much contrast dye, and the more tests her doctors ordered, the closer she came to that invisible line. And the real question is, was she risking her kidneys for nothing? And more importantly, would her doctors figure it out before time ran out? At this point, her medical team was completely stumped. They kept running tests, but the results only led to dead ends. They even did an EMG, a test that measures how well the muscles in her legs were firing. That came back normal. So, while JS was getting weaker and weaker, it became painfully clear they were searching in the wrong direction. Eventually, the team realized they needed to take a step back. In medicine, we call this going back to the differential diagnosis, which is basically doctor speak for maybe we should stop banging our heads against this wall and try a different door. So they reset, wiped the slate clean, and returned to the basics: her blood work. And that's when a new clue appeared. JS was anemic. When she arrived, her hemoglobin was already low at 9.6 g/dl, enough to explain some of her crushing fatigue. But 3 days later, it had dropped even further, down to 7.3 g/dl. That's not just concerning, it's dangerous. At that level, her heart and her kidneys were both at risk. Now, the first thing doctors do when anemia shows up is look at the size of the red blood cells. This is critical for CKD patients, too. If the cells are too small, it often points to iron deficiency. Too big, and it might be B12 deficiency. But in JS's case, her red blood cells were normal in size. And to make it more confusing, her bone marrow was still producing enough of them. So where were all those red blood cells going? That question led to even more tests, more blood work, repeated urine tests, even a painful skin punch biopsy. And still, nothing explained why JS was deteriorating so quickly. Her doctors remained fixated on her legs, while her condition worsened before their eyes. So, let's take a step back ourselves. If you were following along, looking at her symptoms, the anemia, the swelling, the fatigue, what would you suspect? Could you solve the mystery that even a full medical team was struggling with? It's tough, isn't it? Because unless you know her secret, none of these pieces add up. But let me give you one last clue. And you may have guessed it already from the title of this video. This woman was following a diet that carried a hidden, life-threatening danger. Here's where things finally start to make sense, and it all comes down to her diet. That was the missing piece that led her doctors to the right diagnosis. You see, JS was following a diet she believed would help with her allergies. But which one was it? Let's turn this into a little quiz. What do you think? Was she pescatarian? Maybe on keto? Vegan? Could she have gone full carnivore? Or maybe intermittent fasting? If you have a guess, jot it down in the comments. I promise the real answer will surprise you almost as much as it shocked her doctors. Imagine this: days and days of medical tests, every possible exam you can think of, and still no answers. And then it turns out the problem wasn't a hidden disease inside her body at all, it was something she had simply chosen to leave off her plate. By the 7th day in the hospital, JS was beyond exhausted. Honestly, so was her medical team. They looked like zombies wandering the halls bleary-eyed, running on coffee, grasping for answers. And then, finally, the breakthrough happened almost by accident. A few of her doctors walked into her room at lunchtime, probably ready to throw their hands up in the air. But instead, they noticed something odd. Her lunch tray was still full. She hadn't touched a bite. "JS, what's wrong?" "Nausea," one of them asked gently. But she shook her head. No, that wasn't it. So finally one doctor asked the right question. "JS, is there something about your diet we should know?" And that's when she admitted it. "Oh yes. I've stopped eating fruits and vegetables. Don't you know? They can cause allergies. I'm a carnivore now." Can you imagine? A whole team of doctors running test after test, nearly putting her through dialysis, and the answer was simply that she had cut out fruits and veggies. At that point, they ordered the one test that actually mattered, her vitamin C levels. The results? Practically undetectable. She was suffering from severe vitamin C deficiency scurvy. Just like sailors from centuries ago. That's the danger of following bad advice online. You think you're helping your body, when in reality, you're starving it of something essential. And in this case, all that was missing was an eye patch and a parrot squawking, "Eat an orange, matey." So here's the big question. Did JS's doctors figure it out in time? Or had she lived with anemia long enough to cause permanent damage to her heart and kidneys? Scurvy might sound like something out of a history book, but don't be fooled, it can still pack a serious punch. And before we go further, there's an important lesson here for all of us. Let me ask you, are you getting enough vitamin C? You might be thinking, come on, Catherine, we're not pirates, and I'm definitely not on a carnivore diet. Why should I worry? And you're right, you're probably not going to end up in the hospital with scurvy. But that doesn't mean vitamin C is optional. Your body needs it every single day. The good news? It's really simple. For someone like JS, just one medium orange, half a cup of red bell pepper, a handful of strawberries, or even a single kiwi would have been enough to meet her daily needs. Yep, just one kiwi a day can keep scurvy away. Now, for those of you with kidney disease, here's where it gets a little trickier. Many vitamin C-rich foods are also high in potassium, and that can be a concern if your doctor has asked you to limit it. But don't worry, you still have plenty of safe, kidney-friendly options. Strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, apples, grapes, watermelon, and pineapple are all wonderful choices that give you vitamin C without overloading your potassium. As long as you're including some fruits and veggies in your diet and not living off raw milk and questionable internet advice, you'll be just fine. Here's something fascinating I learned while researching JS's case. Most countries quietly fortify foods with vitamin C. In the US, for example, breakfast cereals, juices, and even some dairy products get a vitamin C boost. It's like built-in health insurance against scurvy. But here's the twist: Canada doesn't do this. And that's exactly where JS lives. Which might explain why cases of scurvy have started showing up there again. So, whether you're in Canada or anywhere else, do yourself a favor, eat that kiwi. Now, back to JS. Did she recover? The answer is a happy one. As soon as her doctors suspected scurvy, they gave her oral vitamin C. And the turnaround was dramatic. Within 24 hours, her energy came back. Within 48, her bruises started to fade. And over the next few months, her body repaired itself for anemia, leg pain, joint pain, and rash all disappeared. In the end, JS made a full recovery. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope her story reminds you just how powerful something as small as a vitamin can be. Until next time, take care of yourself, eat your fruits and veggies, and God bless you. Bye for now.